I'm gonna try to see if I can hit like the media intro. I uploaded it. Let's see if it actually works. All right. Does it work? Cool. That actually worked. All right, I'll take that.
That actually worked.
Was
Yeah.
it this short?
It's just like the three
I was
minute.
I was
It's the
readying
3 second.
myself to dance.
Yeah. Maybe I need to make a longer one. It's like a
Yeah,
sample
slightly.
it's a sample which I picked up from SoundCloud in 2022 when I first started doing this. So that's what we use until we get something better or something longer.
True.
But
One
yeah,
of us can date a musician, and then you can get it for free.
yes, that's the whole point. Speaking of free, I've also started a Patreon now because I am broke and I've been funding this myself the whole time. And I think after 40 episodes, we need to get better in terms of editing, lighting, and
Yeah.
so on. So I have started a Patreon. Of course, no content's going to be behind paywalls because the whole point is that everybody should have access to this. So, but if anybody wants to, donate, help out, of course, there's the YouTube thanks stuff as well. But I think I need a few more viewers for that. But yeah, if you could chuck some money on Patreon to support us, that would be great. Yeah. With that, let's get to the actual episode. So welcome Gio and Ferro. Ferro is co-hosting
Hello,
again.
hello.
And Gio is our guest today. So I'm going to give a little intro about Gio, and he's already sweating a little bit. So Gio and I go a bit back. We've been friends since undergrad. Having said that, before even meeting me, Gio did a degree in statistics way back in the Philippines. Is that correct? Yes. Am I getting that right?
Oh, wow.
Right. So you did a degree in statistics, then you got a degree in development studies. The order is a bit messed up here, but you got a degree in development studies, you got a degree in law, you have a degree in international relations, and you have a degree in politics. You speak about 13 languages at different proficiencies. You have
Eight.
You have 8.
8.
Okay. 8. It's gone down since we last met.
Yeah.
There is he has 2 YouTube channels. One's about gaming. He is a Formula One fan, but he does not think
Same.
Alonso is good looking. So take of that what you will.
That is fact.
No. That is. He's on a league of his own, though.
Okay, but who are you supporting right now? Sorry, I'll let Sahar finish the intro.
I've always been a Mercedes fan since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That German engineering, right?
Yeah. Do you think Sainz will make a move to Mercedes? Sorry, cut this out. Cut this out.
I am praying.
I'm praying too. Oh my god. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. I forgot what else I needed to say. Oh no, so the reason I got Ferro on and Gio on here is because Gio, as I listed, has expertise in many things. He was also the president of the Victoria University Student Union for a while. He's the kind of guy who's had his finger in many jars. He's done so many things, and his most recent project, his master's project, was looking at the role of the Catholic Church in international relations and politics. That's a kind of brief idea of it, and kind of reimagining what it looks like. And I found it very interesting because, of course, we spoke to Professor Alberto Costi about international law and how that kind of works and some of the tenets of it before. And Ferro's been on talking about religion in various different roles, but we've had guests on talking about the role of religion in society, but then also I'm blanking on the name now. When Hugh came on and spoke about Catholicism in Ireland and how the kind of entire political system was kind of influenced by that. So, and nowadays as well, we see, right, like Islamic countries have certain Islamic laws. Hindu countries have laws based on Hinduism. So it kind of made sense to talk about the role of the Catholic Church, or like the role of religion in kind of international relations and politics. So that's why Gio's on. That's why Ferro's on, because maybe Ferro can give like a more social side kind of questions, or more of the religion sociology side of questions to Gio, and we can learn a bit about these kind of how these ideas and concepts and behaviors kind of intermingle with each other. So welcome Gio, welcome Ferro.
Thank you.
Yeah, You must be glad. I could have gone a lot worse with this because I've known you for so long.
I know.
As, as
What are
introspect.
the 8 languages?
Oh, okay. So I'm natively bilingual in English and Filipino, growing
Yeah,
up in the Philippines.
yeah.
Um, and then Spanish became uh, some sort of like a natural progression, just because Filipino
Philippine, yeah,
is very much heavily Spanish influenced. And then
yeah.
Spanish became French, became Italian, and then became Portuguese. And then I had this opportunity back in 2015 to work in Poland
Nice.
as an English teacher for 3 months, and then that also gave me a chance to like visit Germany and Austria, and kind of picked up German along the way.
On a visit.
Yeah, well,
Mm.
I kind of prepared beforehand, but um, I was like, okay, this is my time to like brush up on German skills and things like
Yeah,
that. And then
yeah.
Dutch was inspired by a common friend of me and Sahir, like the guy that was the reason why Sahir and I became friends. Yeah. So yeah, we go a long way, and so oh, you know what? And I actually dated a Dutch girl before, so kind of like
That definitely helps. Yeah.
impress her with her language skill, with my language skills. Um, the dating didn't work out, but the language skill um
Language remained.
I retained the language. Yep. And then
Is that
trying to learn a few more.
is that all eight? I said 13 because
Yeah.
that's what you had on your LinkedIn. It said proficiency in 13 languages, or to varying degrees. Like not all
Never
of them
read
were
out
good.
anyone's LinkedIn. It's not always true.
No, I think it became 13 because there were certifications that got doubled.
Ah, all right, all right, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough, fair enough. We'll give you the benefit of that on that one. But
Yep.
let's talk about the actual your your actual research project.
Sure.
So it is about the role of the reimagining the role of the Catholic Church. Um,
Yep.
what do you mean by reimagining? So I guess we need to start off, I guess, at the birth of Christ, don't we, or just after,
No,
whenever it actually
not
became a
Wait,
thing.
wait. I think the first question should be what has been the role of the Catholic Church, and then how are we reimagining it?
all right.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Sure. Well, it's actually funny because I wasn't when I started this project, I wasn't really hell bent on reimagining what the role actually is. It's more like just understanding why in a world that seems to be secular or so-called secular, there is still that power given to one religion, like or one denomination. I was making the comparison, whereas because the Catholic Church, amongst all the Christian denominations, the Catholic Church has a state. The Catholic Church has presence in the UN. So the big question for me is why is that still possible? And then that also that question as to the question of the presence of the Vatican as a city state that is actually owned by the Catholic Church. Like no other Christian denomination, no other religion has that status. Every major religion in the world has that like set center, like a holy city or something. Like Islam has Mecca, but Mecca doesn't have that global political status compared to like the Vatican. So I was really interested as to like what are the mechanisms that allowed those things to flourish despite a secular, what seems to be a more secular um, global outlook. And then as I went on with my research, I kind of what I started gathering was the church is the Catholic Church is categorized in academic literature as a transnational entity, which is defined as an entity that goes across different, operates among different states, but still within the borders or like the confines of the state itself. So like multinational corporations, they operate in different countries, but they still have to adhere to the national laws of of every state that they work in. But what I notice is it doesn't really fit the Catholic Church. That categorization doesn't fit the Catholic Church because, like I said, it has a state of its own with the Vatican. Its influence goes beyond state confines. So I was like, wait a minute, what is going on here? And when I went to the Netherlands last year for my exchange program, I enrolled in this class called Advanced Philosophy of Global Law, which like looks at from a from legal philosophical standpoint how global legal orders actually work. Like things like the UN or the World Trade Organization. It's like how are they operating from a global legal standpoint without being confined by state state apparatus. And there that class or that course has a very or it's informed by one single theory called the globalization of inclusion and exclusion by Dr. Professor Hans Lindell, who also taught that class. And I was like, while I was going through the class, I saw like snippets of how I could apply that theory to my project. And so I started delving into Professor Lindell's theory, and it kind of it kind of fit. So, and because of that fitting of that theory, I was able to unpack a different way of looking at the Catholic Church as a global, not just no longer as a transnational entity, but as a global legal order. So they're no in my research, it seems like the Catholic Church is no longer categorized just like a multinational company, but rather a global institution with global legal influence, just like the World Trade Organization or the UN. So, and that's how the reimagining came to be. It's because there is um, there used to be a categorization in the academic literature that I inad- inadvertently challenged, and somehow it kind of worked. So that's kind of like the gist of why I title my thesis as reimagining the role.
It's super
Yeah.
interesting. Just before I ask any more questions, I just wanted to get your positionality. Like, are
Yes.
you yourself Catholic, and would you consider yourself to be religious yourself?
Um, I am Catholic. I identify as Catholic. And not just because I'm Filipino, growing up in a very Catholic background, but
Yeah,
I've um actually I've kind of found my sense of belonging within the
yeah.
Catholic Church. But having said that, I don't consider myself religious,
Okay.
or at least religious in the traditional sense that um I, I don't I don't go to church regularly, and I kind of have my own way of practicing my Catholic faith.
Yeah, but there
Yes,
is faith. You do
yeah,
hold faith.
yeah. I do hold faith.
So I just wanted to quickly like ask you did say that the church has like legal implications in terms of
Yes.
like the place in the places it exists in. So maybe can you give us a background in terms of like what were some of the legal implications it had in Philippines, where you were growing up, or in the different places that you've lived. Just for context, like, I mean, I know that Sahir isn't Catholic, but I am also not Catholic, so I actually know
Mm,
nothing about how Catholicism influences state. I am
yep,
now seeing how Hinduism is beginning to influence state-based decisions, but I kind of grew up in a relatively secular space. I mean,
yep,
you can argue that India was secular at one point. So, so I actually don't really know how like the church can influence state. I've only heard about it in theory. So maybe if you can
yep.
ground that for us
It
with some
is,
examples.
yeah, it is interesting because the Philippines is also, well, constitutionally and legally is a secular state,
Yeah.
but but because of, we were colonized by Spain for 400 years. That's you know so much so that the Catholic Church was is deeply rooted in Philippine society. Um, and you would see in the legal implications of that having, even our politicians would always like use their personal faith to try to influence policy in parliament. um there are also instances where, like for example, the 1986 people power revolution. I wasn't born yet, by the way. Just learn, just learning from history books and stuff. Like the 1986 revolution that toppled the dictator, the Marcos dictatorship, was led by the Catholic Church. Because back then, because the the state was already like hell bent on maintaining one person in power, that the only form of resistance that the people can hold on to was the Catholic Church. So, and the Archbishop of Manila back then made calls to like, there was already a mutiny taking place among the military back then, and the Catholic Church was like, the faithful should go and protect the heroes, blah blah blah, things like that. And thus, and what was supposed to be a call for just a few people, turned into like a huge rally of almost 20 million people that blocked the main thoroughfare of Manila, and the it forced the military of the government back then to step down, support the people, and then essentially ousted the dictator from power. So that's how politically and legally powerful, or influential, I should say, the Catholic Church is, at least in the Philippines. And now we're seeing like, um, in a lot of social issues back home in the Philippines, there's always that Catholic element um, within the discourse. Like, we- um, the the Philippines is the only country in the world, aside from the Vatican, where divorce is still illegal.
Oh, really?
Yes. So, and most people who are against divorce you would always almost hear their reasoning being so Catholic or so Christian. Like, marriage is between man and marriage is a God given institution, things like that. And so from there, you would really see how deeply rooted Catholic society is in the Philippines. And that's actually part of the reason why I wanted to understand how that influence still going on. Because apparently it's not just in the Philippines that it's happening. In the other side of the world, in Latin America, it's the same. So I could say that a lot of my questions that informed my research came out of like personal experiences.
Hmm. Um, so would you consider Philippines a theocracy or not really? Although you say it's secular, but the influence is so high.
Um, it does seem to have vestiges of theocracy, especially um, if you see, especially during elections, that um, people who are running for office would almost always seek the approval of the different major denominations in the country, because they feel that having the endorsement of a certain bishop or um, a certain influential religious figure is validation of their work. So in a way, we're not. I won't go far as to calling the Philippines a theocracy, but I think we are on the way to being one.
Because so the episode which we did with Hugh Turpin about Ireland, and he said that because when I asked something similar, he said that no, we Ireland was never a theocracy because religion was just so ingrained in the entire thing that it never needed to be. It's just that it was
Mm,
part of every part of education and daily life, that it never needed to be a theocracy. It was just the influence of Catholicism was so strong.
yeah.
Um, Also, when you were talking about the the revolt after your dictatorship, and the one haven being the Catholic Church, you see sort of shades of it in Iran, in the revolution in Iran, being like one of the places which I guess the power coalesced around is uh well, would you say what's it called now? He's not the Ayatollah, isn't it? Yeah.
Mm,
Um, so that's like a Islamic example of the same thing, where a dictator being
mm,
overthrown, but then power generally coalescing around religion. Uh,
yep. Yeah, I think comparing to what he was saying before about Catholicism's deep roots in Ireland, I think why I was able to not go that far was the Philippines is still a multinational country, and in the South, you still have you still have that very strong Muslim um, majority regions. Because what happened during colonization is that the southernmost part of the Philippines was the last part of the Philippines to be colonized by Spain, because the Muslim, the sultans, especially the Sulu Sultanate, which was apparently one of the most powerful sultanates in Southeast Asia back in the 13th and 14th centuries, they really resisted Spanish colonization. Except that uh, Spain Spain was more technologically advanced than the sultanates, so they were able to subdue uh, the Muslim majority areas. But it was like probably one of the longest armed resistance that the archipelago has seen in its history, ever since, even before the Spanish arrived. That was like a really huge form of armed resistance, that and up until now there's still like vestiges of that armed resistance going on. um the Muslim insurgency down south has never been resolved. There have been peace talks, and that's already like in place, but the question still remains. And now with the entry of organizations like ISIL, um, kind of complicates a lot of things. So that's why I think that's I think one of the reasons why the Philippines would be hard to turn into a full blown Catholic theocracy.
Interesting. So should should we? You've grounded you've grounded us into examples we're using the Philippines of the influence of the Catholic Church.
Yep.
Um, could you give? You also mentioned a theory which you used in
Mhm.
reimagining. uh, yeah, which you used in your project. Could you give us like a brief overview or an idea of what that theory was? You gave me a name and I've forgotten it already.
Sure. So the general theory itself is like Professor Lindel's work on the globalization of inclusion and exclusion. Within that, um, he he developed this legal model, or a model of looking at legal orders, which he calls the wait, I'm gonna like just look at my notes for a moment. Institutionalized and authoritatively mediated collective action, or for easier recall, we call it the IACA model, IACA. Um, so what is this? Is that what this entails is that legal orders, especially global legal orders, in Professor Lindel's view, is a species of collective action. But what sets it apart from other forms of collective action is that it has authority that is authoritatively mediated. So there is like that vestige, or like semblance, that there is a group of people within the collective action that mediates and forms the authority to make sure that the collective stays within the bounds of the collective action. And then it's also institutionalized in the sense that there is a proper, or like a specific legal structure that ensures that the collective action stays in place. And at first, I was like quite skeptical about using this theory, but the more that I researched about the actual structure of the Catholic Church, not just their theological, or not just their spiritual functions, but they actually have this political and legal structure that defines what the Catholic Church is. So certain a lot of documents that the Vatican has produced, especially during the last ecumenical council, which is the Vatican II back in the 1970s. It it doesn't it isn't it doesn't just serve as a doctrine, or like a basis or constitution of the faithful, but also has legal power because of the structure that was put in place millennia ago, uh, that allows the Catholic Church to be this, not I wouldn't want to say monolithic, but this huge global entity that is able to wield influence and therefore power.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think it reminds me of like my specialization, which is cultural evolution. And the argument is that religions stay popular and stay relevant because they can evolve to the needs of the given community that they exist in. And it's kind of really interesting to hear that there are actually like, I don't know how to say it, like there are actually like written codes for the church to evolve and like kind of suit the need of the community. Like that's so smart and like
Yep,
thinking so much ahead.
it is like and what my thesis, like in my research as well, it I did not just like stop with categorizing the Catholic Church based on Professor Lindel's model, but also I was also able to take it a step further, and that's why my hypothesis, I made my hypothesis like two pronged. Like there are two mechanisms allowing the church to continually continuously
Yeah.
wield influence and power in the global arena. Well, one was that, legally speaking, it is a global legal order based on Professor Lindel's IACA model. But the second, and what I found most interesting, is that being a legal order allows the Catholic Church to essentially lead the world in this debate where secular and post-secular thought are clashing, and therefore the Catholic Church is essentially leading the world in what we see as a resurgence of religion in the global arena. Because if every it well this resurgence actually started as from the Clash of Civilizations argument by Samuel Huntington, but that has long been debunked. But however, there are like still thoughts, especially if you see in the global, especially when you see it in the global South. Um, you know, the modern world in the North have always been saying, okay, you people in the global South, we will make you like us, we will make you modern, we will make you progressive. But that promise has been broken time and time again. And therefore, people in the global South have started to like question the relevance of modernity and progress in their lives because of that broken promise, that the only thing familiar to them that they can hold on to is religion. And because of that, the is not religion essentially became, if not complementing the role of the state, it actually replaces the role of the state. You see in a lot of countries where, because the state could not provide hospitals, schools, universities, parks, most of these social services have been provided by religious organizations. Like correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard like in India there are Hindu-run orphanages
Yeah, and Catholic-run orphanages.
And
and
I
lots of
think it's a
Catholic-run
lots of
orphanages.
Muslim.
lots of Muslim run ones as well, like different
Yeah,
denominations. Yeah,
yeah,
mostly run by different religious
because
entities.
the state has failed to deliver on the promise of modernization, modernity, and progress, the church has been able to like, or religions in general, kind essentially replaced all these roles of the
Yeah,
state, and therefore, for the people in the global south, why am I gonna listen to the state if they're not even providing my needs? I'm gonna listen to the church because they're the ones providing for me. And so because of that, people in the global north who's like been secular ever since the enlightenment, it's like, no, 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 religion is irrelevant, you should not be listening to them. But hey, and then the global south be like, but you're not delivering on your promises and I need to survive. So that's essentially, there's now this debate between, should we still remain a secular world if the secular promises of modernity and progress has already been broken, and the things that they have been promising since the enlightenment was actually being delivered by non-secular organizations. And because of that debate, the Catholic Church is like, okay, hold on, let's take it one step at a time. But at the same time, they're also like, okay, we're gonna do this. So that's basically that, being a legal order in itself, in this debate between secular and post-secular thought, which is essentially allows the Catholic Church as a global entity to continuously wield power and even come back I had argued that they were able to come back to the same level of power that they had during the medieval ages, when the Pope is essentially at the top of the international hierarchy.
Yeah. Very interesting points made because like just to relate it to the literature that I know,
Yep.
it's very closely related to why religion came to be in the first place. Like if you look at these big religions, these especially Abrahamic religions, the idea goes that you kind of, as soon as we started living in like these larger and larger groups, you kind of needed, and there was no police, there was no, you kind of needed people to like self-correct and cooperate. You know, you needed to punish people who were like socially loafing and stuff like that. And so the idea of like this omniscient God that is perennially present, that's punitive, came into being. So it's like God is always watching you, and God will punish you, and stuff like that, which I think are tenets of the Abrahamic religions. And y'all can correct me because I'm not Abrahamic in faith, um, but then slowly, as we started developing states, we had all these functions being taken over by the state. So you kind of didn't need God to be constantly watching you because you have CCTV cameras everywhere.
Yep.
You don't need God to punish you because you have the police system and the legal system and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
so, as the theory goes, if you see in like these super developed countries, so Scandinavian countries, where the state is really able to, like you said, meet on the promises of modernity or take over the role of religion, you see less religiosity. But in spaces where like these functions are not properly or not universally provided by the state, but basically, point being that whenever, like it's around the same thing. So whenever the state can't provide these functions that God is supposed to provide, religiosity is really high. So I think you're really like it's really true and on the nose, like on the money, what you have theorized. But my question then is, it's like when you speak about like this global legalization and stuff like that, I don't know, maybe this is unrelated, but have you heard of the term glocal?
Yes.
Like, you know, like
Yeah.
McDonald's, like it has global marketing, like
Yes.
it has global concepts, but relates to like local ideas and stuff like that. But yeah, the idea of global marketing and stuff like that. Do you find that within the church, like this idea of being global to remain relevant in different
Yes.
spaces?
Actually, that term glocal or glocalization is a huge part of Professor Lindell's theory as well. And there are within the Catholic Church, even though they have their own like legal structure, they have their own political hierarchy, and even though they are well outside state confines, they still make it a point to localize themselves. Because within within the Catholic, the simple hierarchy is in the Catholic Church that you have the Pope, and then each um, countries have their archdioceses up until like the very local level, which is the parish. And you would see in in these parishes, or even in the higher level, which is the diocese, that they still, even though they are just mandated to follow the the Catholic Church's own hierarchy, they still make it a point to blend themselves in within the locality that they're working on, socially, culturally, even politically and legally. Um, what I see here is that for the church, because they also experienced this point in time where they were largely irrelevant globally, and if they keep on insisting at this point in time, if they keep on insisting that they are superior to the, because back then, especially in the medieval ages, um, the law of the church is way different from the law of man. So there's always that distinction. But now, what they're seeing is we will lose our relevance again if we keep on insisting that the law of God is far superior to the law of man. Within their within the doctrine, it would still be that way, but we have to also adapt to what to how our local community um, works or operates, and therefore that's how you see the localization taking place within the Catholic Church. Um, and you'd see, especially in like, so I'll use the Philippines again as an example. Um, Parishes are usually for every town or every village. There's a separate parish. That's how large the Catholic community in the Philippines is, and you would see that some Catholic practices in one village differ from the Catholic practices in another village. And you'd see that in a lot of, especially with the local village fiestas or things like that. How they celebrate is very, very localized, even though it's seen as a Catholic tradition. How they celebrate is very, very attuned to the local culture and the needs of the local people. And so there's no village fiesta or town fiesta that are exactly the same in the Philippines, even though its tradition is rooted in the Catholic tradition. And um and you would see that as well. Legally speaking, if you see some of the legal documents of the Catholic Church, before before the before the Second Ecumenical Council of the Vatican, it is a requirement that Mass is said only in Latin. But now, because of globalization, the church has allowed parishes to have masses in the local language. And now, especially with this huge global phenomenon we call migration, where um, parishes in, say, for example, here in New Zealand, um, where there's like where the Filipino Catholic community is getting bigger and bigger almost every year. A lot of parishes here in New Zealand offer masses in the Filipino language, and so that that also allows the localization of the Catholic Church also allows the Catholic Church itself to actually wield further influence globally speaking or in the global arena, because especially with migration itself, like these migrants bring their uh, bring their own faith, their own culture to the host country. And you would see that in in host countries that have huge swathes of migrants from largely Catholic um, countries from the global south, that the Catholic Church has reflourished. And I think it's true if you see like huge migrations of people from Muslim dominated countries. You would see a flourishing of Islam in that host country. Um, when I was in the Netherlands last year, mosques are abound in almost every city because there's like huge Turkish, Moroccan um, migrant communities that are predominantly Muslim. So you would see like a lot of this tenets of Islam that kind of seep um, into the local community, and therefore, for the Catholic Church having that, because they have this global hierarchy or this global structure, they kind of use all these happenings within the local level to actually wield even more influence globally, in the guise of saying that we have this huge diaspora in the entire globe that we have to like pastor and look after.
Um, I was gonna I was gonna ask, what about other denominations of Christianity? How do they play into this? I'm guessing uh, what's it? Evangelical Christians in the States, or Anglican. The Anglican Church is the church in the UK. Does the Catholic Church in any way wield any influence on these groups, or not really?
Um, in I'd say yes and no. Yes, in a sense that, well, I'll start with the no. It's easier. It's easier to respond to no, because, well, historically speaking, these all these other Christian denominations were created because as a protest against the
Yep.
influence of the Catholic Church.
Yep.
But at the same time, how in this point in time, the political league and legal influence of the Catholic Church is much more wielded in issues that have a universal effect, like human rights, climate change. You'd see, like, especially with Pope Francis, like almost every papal bull and papal exhortation that the current Pope has released has a call to action to resolve climate change, to resolve human rights violations. And so, even if you are a non-Catholic, you kind of resonate with all these things that the church is saying, because you're also affected by it. And so, the political and legal influence of the church right now is no longer the same as before, in the sense that, if if two kings are disputing a parcel of land, it's the pope who would intervene. So it's no longer that kind of political, but rather, um, the pope having, especially with the pope having this huge influence as the leader of the Catholic Church and a head of state in himself, being the head of state of the Vatican. He is in a position to influence um, global social issues, especially climate change. So, and because that resonates more with more people compared to like conflicts, like the high level stuff, that's how the Catholic Church is like wielding its influence. Like, it starts small. It kind of like starts small, but goes bigger and bigger as the issue gets bigger and bigger.
All of the points that you've said, like, kind of make a lot of sense, especially since Pope Francis, because yeah, you've seen him come out and mention, yeah, human rights. He turned a much softer tone on the
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ community. I
Mm-hmm.
remember that because that was I remember a lot of Christians, or like, saying Christians is weird, but like very devout religious figures being strongly opposed to his
Yep.
statements when came out and said it. But you can see that, as you said, changing with the times, kind of molding yourself to what popular sentiment is, even if it is
Mm-hmm.
against the initial religious doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, uh, it seems like a good way to kind of stay in power and in good graces of a lot of people.
Yeah.
You've been talking about a resurgence of religion, which is interesting because that's, I guess, I mean, yes, right wing religiosity is on the rise, but at the same time, atheism is also on the rise. And a lot of it has to do with, you know, the sexual abuse that has been rampant within the church. Yes, it's localizing, but is it staying up with the modern times in terms of, LGBTQIA rights, about other stuff? So um, I just want to know, how, in your opinion, is the Catholic Church still relevant in light of all these events? How do you think these events are influencing the church's, I guess, legal prowess across the globe, or its influence? Do you think, I actually have a, sorry, to continue do you think because of these things, it's slowly moving back from like this global legal organization to this transnational organization where it just becomes a part of a country rather than the main influencing body of a country?
Yep. It's actually a very interesting question that I did mention in my thesis that we have to delve deeper, but I did touch on it uh, quite briefly, where and that is actually the part where, especially with the cases on the child abuse things, like um, from a political standpoint, it is like it does diminish or at least question the credibility of the church, and a lot of people have fairly questioned the church as to how dare you say these things about human rights, blah blah blah, if you cannot fix your own problems. You know, like that adage that says, "Fix your fix your own backyard first before you fix others' backyards." But having said that, w- one of the huge um, one of the huge tenets, or actually the main tenet of Professor Lindo's theory, was these global legal orders are within a framework, or actually facilitates this framework, which he calls the globalization of inclusion and exclusion, where his argument is because of globalization, where legal order in the attempt of legal orders like the WTO and now the Catholic Church, in their attempts to include everyone, they are inadvertently excluding people. I remember in class, Professor Lindell always uses the example of the Karnataka state farmers, um, where because the WTO wanted to include them in this legal order of trade, um, they found the Karnataka state farmers found themselves actually outside that uh, order of inclusion because they refused to use the seeds that were developed by Monsanto because of like different issues. So in the sense of the Catholic Church and the especially with the the sexual abuse cases, um, there have always there have been numerous cases cases in court that went through that says because the Catholic Church is a state of its own, it has state immunity, and we cannot litigate this issue because they're not within our jurisdiction. And therefore, because of that, the victims that were supposed to be included in legal this legal order that was created by the Catholic Church suddenly felt excluded because they can no longer find justice because of this issue of state immunity. So, and that's a really interesting dynamic that in a way also becomes inclusion and exclusion within the church in itself. What I mean by that is they are trying to include themselves in this global political legal arena, in this realm of a globalized world, and that's why they're trying to stay relevant. But there are issues that they are really really they really have a hardline stance on, that inadvertently excludes them again from this global arena. And so that's why I said it was like an interesting dynamic that needs further research and development um, in that area. But at the same time, it it seems it's as if, because they're trying to create these areas where people are included, whether you're Catholic or not, we want to include you, but that they also find themselves excluding others, most especially those who were already included to begin with. So that's a very huge dynamic that still needs like much more deeper thought.
I did want to pick up on that because you did speak about inclusion and exclusion, but the second part of Pharaoh's question was um, that religion in general, the dynamics of religion have changed a lot since
Mhm.
the Holy Roman Empire, um, and even and so how do you actually kind of tackle the role of the Catholic Church when I guess Islam is soon to be the largest religion? I think Sunni Islam as a particular sect is the largest
Mhm.
religion. Um, how do you how does the Catholic Church kind of cite in the fact that there's a lot there's a bigger push for evangelical Christianity in the US in the halls of power there, and they kind of use that link as the one for a lot of decision making, particularly on the Republican side. Um, so yeah, so how do all these things, with all these other growing things, with the rise in atheism as well, mostly as a rejection of Catholicism based on
Mhm.
colonization, uh, to a large extent, in New Zealand and a few other
Yep.
countries where there's indigenous communities. With with all with all those things, how doesn't it look that generally the power of the Catholic Church, even though it is a state and has state immunity, is kind of waning?
Yeah, that's really that's an interesting aspect that I let me just
Pull the papers out.
yeah, pull the papers out. Um yeah, that's actually interesting, given what you said about, like, questions about other religions gaining ground, and questions. um i kind of I kind of grounded my argument on that on Jürgen Habermas, and what Habermas was saying is that, um so he was looking more about religions in general, but I was able to apply it to the Catholic Church. So he has three phenomena that he observed contributes to like a growing resurgence of religion. The first one is that, um, because of there's a lot of the first one there's a lot of conflicts in the world happening right now, and even if it's not really religious, it's not really a religious conflict. Media would always portray it as a religious conflict. Case in point, the current situation in Gaza, where it's not really Islam versus Christianity or Islam versus Jews, but the media has been portraying it as so. And um, because of that portrayal, people started questioning: did religion actually become irrelevant in the first place? And because of that questioning, for the Catholic Church, they found it as a way, or like a hole to poke through, to start um, making moves on influencing global discourse in a way that does not really hurt on other religions' sensitivities. Like, um, for example, in the question of conflicts, Pope Francis has, um, in one of his exhortations, Pope Francis questioned, is it really humane for anyone to take continue being uh oh wait, sorry, I'll rephrase that. I'll quote him directly. What would induce anyone at this stage to hold on to power only to be remembered for their inability to take action when it was urgent and necessary to do so? So he was grounding it in such a way that, from by referencing verses from the Bible, but he delivered it in such a way that it didn't sound fully Catholic at all. And so, um, because of those, like, very well crafted statements, questioning, like, you would one would then have a perception that, okay, this pope, and by extension the church, is also taking our side, even though we're not Catholics, is also taking our side and ensuring that we remain as human as possible in the eyes of the world. And that resonates a lot with even non-Catholics. Another one that allows it, that despite all the rise of atheism as well, another reason that the Catholic Church still has that power or that influence is migration. Um, a lot of Catholic majority countries are in the global South. Same is true with a lot of Islam majority countries, or Hindu majority countries, or religion majority countries in general. But because of when these people migrate, they don't just leave their culture behind. They bring it with them, and part of their culture is their religion. And these migrants ensure that while they don't force the host country to adapt their religion, they want to make sure that the generations that come after them would keep the same culture and traditions, including religion. And because of that, um, it's it's what I called the grassroots movement of the Catholic Church, with and how they influence and wield power, because these migrants are religion is so ingrained in them personally, and they want to make sure that their next of kin, their next generations, would keep the same faith, would keep the same traditions. That essentially becomes the grassroots movement that the Catholic Church needs, or wants, in order for their influence to even become more global. And because migrants are now everywhere, um, that grassroots movement has become a little bit more faster. So despite the rise of atheism in general, despite evangelical Christians um, reigning in power in, say, the United States or other places, we really cannot dismiss the power of the grassroots movement. And that is where the Catholic Church really hits it home.
In your opinion, and this is maybe connected to your positionality about religion, like, I guess the nature of religion is also changing. It's not just the role of religion, but the nature of religiosity is also significantly evolving. There are newer religions. Like you said, you have faith, but you aren't religious. You don't follow the, like the behavioral practices that come with being Catholic and stuff like that. Do you think these changing behaviors that are related to religiosity, especially the Catholic Church, do you think they have an impact on how influential the church will be in the coming years? With more and more people, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yep. But definitely. And that goes back to how that also goes back to the grassroots power of the church that I was talking about. Um, One concrete example that I can think at the top of my head is back in the 80s, back in the 90s, when I was still a kid, you couldn't, the only, in mass, right, or in services, the only instrument you could hear is the pipe organ or any other organ. And for a lot of young people now, it's boring. It's boring hearing that. But now you could hear holy masses or services that are festive in nature. You would hear like full bands, orchestras, and that kind of strengthens especially young people's perceptions of how it is to be Catholic, because the nature of religion now, especially Catholic Church, their nature is now evolving in such a way that we are adapting to the changing times. Not possibly not doctrinally, but how we express that doctrine. Um, if you remember the movie Sister Act with Whoopi Goldberg,
I
where
vaguely.
well, okay, so Whoopi Goldberg is a lounge singer. The character of Whoopi Goldberg is a lounge singer, witnessed a murder, and as part of the witness protection program, she was hid by the police in a convent that was dying. Um, but because she found a sense of purpose and understood the evolving nature of the community around her, she injected so much life that the church used to have like 5 people going attending mass every week. The church started becoming full again. And it's those kinds of like it those it's actually those small changes that help make the Catholic Church in particular much more relevant. A lot of people understand that the Catholic Church probably won't change its stance, which won't fully change its stance on LGBTQ issues, euthanasia, abortion. But being able to welcome people who think differently is a huge step forward already for the Catholic Church. And that's how they're able to maintain that influence, because they are able to become more inclusive. But again, at the same time, that also excludes other sectors. But what's important, what I see is working well, is that those who are actually being included are the future generations, the generations that would one day lead the church in one way or another. And because they felt that sense of belonging already because of the changing times. Like um for me personally, even though I said I wasn't religious, I found my sense of belonging within a very particular Catholic group. Um which and that's why I resonate a lot with them. I'm a huge fan, so to speak, of the Jesuits, the Society of Jesus, which was founded by Saint Ignatius of Loyola, because their brand of Catholicism is very, very attuned to the modern times, and um, yeah, they still do. Back at home, they still do a lot of these Catholic things. In fact, the second largest university in the Philippines is owned by the Jesuits, but their brand of teaching is not traditional, so to speak, and that resonates a lot with uh, today's students, so to speak. Like, I have a friend who's Muslim who studied in that university, and he said that his favorite class is Catholic theology, just because the professor, who's a priest, is such a fun guy, a fun teacher, and at the same time, he felt like he wasn't excluded from the discussions just because he was Muslim. Like, the priest was actually asking him about his perspective to make the discussion much more livelier and much more well-rounded. And for him that's something that most religions should emulate. Being able to get perspectives from other religions in order to make your own religion, the perspective of your own religion, better. And it's something that I think not not the entire Catholic Church is good at doing, but there are certain pockets of resistance, so to speak, within the Catholic Church that has been doing that. And so I'm kind of hopeful about the future Catholic of the Catholic Church and religion in general.
Cool. Thank you so much. Sorry, Gio, you can have the floor now with whatever
No,
you
not
want
at
to say. I've been stopping Sahir from letting you do that for a long time now.
Yeah, well, what was your question again? I was so deeply engrossed in the last question, so I was like, "What were you asking again?"
No. It was just I was because we've come to about an hour and we usually start wrapping up about now. So that was a thing. If there were
Yeah.
any key sort of tenets which you wanted to cover, of course we didn't go through the entire history of Catholicism, but people can look it up and things like that. But
Um.
what were some of the key
Yeah.
takeaways from your thesis which you'd want to like give out before we wrap up?
Cool. I think I would just read my closing statement in the thesis, because that's apparently the examiner's favorite part, because I said that society and the global environment are dynamic and ever changing, and as we navigate further the tension between the secular status quo and this resurgence of religion and post secular thought, we need to further understand how this new perspective of looking at the church, especially in the context of global affairs, not only because I think there is a huge what how would I say this? Like, there's a huge value in understanding this new perspective or new role of the Catholic Church, um, in terms of not only understanding the intersections of law, politics, and religion, but also the broader dynamics of the world we live in. So it's not just like what I was offering with this thesis is not only a reimagining of the Catholic Church within the realms of politics and law, but also a different way of understanding and thinking about the world that we live in, especially now that um, a lot of issues that we are facing have whether whether it's true or not, have these vestiges of religiosity that either is true or the media just wants to portray as true. But having this perspective did allow me to understand further the world I'm living in, and hopefully, as I try to develop this argument even further, maybe that's a different way of looking at the world. So yeah.
Very nice. I think that's a good thing to end
Yeah.
on your conclusions. Very well explained. It was very interesting. Uh,
Thank you.
it
Thank you.
meant, yeah, I kind of saw the shades of many sort of religions in it while you were talking, and sort of like the same thing across the board. And
Mhm.
yeah, that kind of interaction between politics and religion and migration and so on. So that was really nice. The last thing which we ask is, if you had one piece of advice for all our listeners, what would that be?
Oh.
Ooh, big question.
Oh. Oh. Stay warm. Ooh.
For my listeners in India, don't listen to him. It's 44 degrees in
For the
Hyderabad
listeners
right
in New
now.
Zealand, it's freezing.
Oh.
So
I'm dying.
Yep. For the
Yeah.
listeners in India, stay hydrated.
awesome. But yeah, thanks
Thanks so
Gio,
much.
thanks Farrell.
Thank
Yeah,
you
thanks
very
for coming on.
much.
Yeah, and everyone, thanks for listening. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.